This video is brought to you by the Steamship Historical Society of America. Through recording, preserving, and educating, our mission is to share the impact of engine-powered vessels, their crews, and their passengers with future generations. Today's subject features 3 Rhode Island women working in the commercial fishing industry. You'll hear from Jenn Fish, Mary O'Rourke, and Stesha Campbell. Here are their stories.
Point Judith, or the Port of Galilee, is a small commercial fishing port located in Narragansett, Rhode Island. It houses a robust and the state's largest commercial fishing fleet here. And it's a very diverse fleet made up of scallopers, lobster boats, draggers, rod and reel boats, gill netters, and everything in between. There are tourism components to the port. There are intermodal transportation and ferry services here. There is a very popularly used public boat launch, as well as a public beach located here. There's a handful of seafood restaurants and gift shops. It's a little bit for everything, but primarily it's a commercial fishing port. Historically, this has always been a mixed species port. At one time, really concentrating on butterfish. Currently, no question, concentrating on loligo squid. We are the squid capital of the world. Basically, Rhode Island has more squid landings than all of the other East Coast states combined. It's a mainstay fishery here in this port, and it supplies calamari internationally as well as domestically, and from many, many fishermen, and providing a lot of economic benefit to the state as far as processing is concerned and, fishing jobs and things like that. We also have a lot of other different fisheries here. Like I said, we're very diverse. It's a lot of differences from New Bedford, for example, where they're pretty much ground fish and scallops. That's really what they have, but we have everything in between. Right now in the winter time, you have offshore lobster boats working on Jonah crab. In the spring and summer, you'll have scallopers transiting this port from anywhere as far as, South Carolina, landing here and making Galilee or Point Judith their temporary home for a couple of weeks or a couple of trips. We have a really strong and historical inshore lobster fleet made up of, boats anywhere from 30 to 50 feet that, are working on a daily basis in Rhode Island state waters and in federal waters. We have some small gill netters, day boat scallopers, that are working scallops but returning every evening. Lobster has always been a very steady producer here as far as economic value to this port. But mostly we do loligo squid, which is our mainstay fishery.
We grew up in Wakefield, but spent a lot of time in Point Judith. A lot of times it was the only time to actually see my dad, especially in the lobster season. I remember when we were little kids, my mom would get us up at 10 or 11 at night, and we'd come down to the co-op when it had a lobster department, and In the summer, that was like the only time we could see our dad, because he was just gone, working. My grandparents started a bait shop down in Point Judith in the 40s. It was back on the bulkhead where Rhode Island Engine is in the corner now, and they used to rent skiffs out. You know, people would come and rent skiffs and buy bait and tackle, and it was a pretty popular thing for people. My father was a lobsterman, turned scalloper, now retired. My brother was a lobsterman, drags now. The first time I lobstered, I actually lobstered with my brother. I worked for him for a couple seasons. And then I went with my dad for a season or two. And then I started working on land and fish markets, and then I started dragging. You know, the most that I can think of is probably 4 or 5 women that have fished out of Point Judith. I'm not too sure about any of the other ports, but 4 or 5 I think is, you know, the top number. From a woman's perspective, sometimes you feel like you have to work twice as hard as the guy standing next to you, because people think, oh, you know, she's just a girl, she can't pull her weight or whatever. But when you finally get recognized for being able to do what you can do, actually, it got a lot easier after that. I really don't see that, you know, other than sometimes I'm not as strong as the guys are, but I think I've been doing it long enough where I know what I'm doing, and I know what needs to be done. I think I carry my own weight. You know, when I was little, and my mom would bring us down to see my dad unloading at the co-op, the original co-op, Galilee Grocery was right across the street. And that's where all the boats would go to get their grub. Up above was Wilcox Marine, so you'd get all your supplies there. You'd go across the street, you'd get all your groceries. Everything was, you know, right there. Now it seems it's more tourist shops and just kind of a gateway for people to go to Block Island. It seems like it's gotten way away from the industry port that it was, that I remember growing up as a little kid, anyway. Sometimes you eat at 9, sometimes you eat at 6, sometimes you eat at midnight. Sometimes you don't eat at all. It all, you know, it all depends on what you're fishing for and how your day's going. It's definitely not a Rachel Ray 30-minute meal kind of deal. When I first started, going four-handed was kind of the norm. So, you know, some of the bigger boats, depending on what you were doing, were even going five-handed. But now most of the boats go three-handed. We're not allowed to keep enough to warrant taking an extra person, you know. Certain days, certain things that you're fishing for, you have to work a little harder because you don't have the extra guy, but it's more money in our pockets also when we can make it. I think it gives me a lot of peace. I think it gives me a lot of independence. It gives me a lot of time to do what I want to do as far as time off. It gives me the opportunity, I would say, to see things that most people will never see in their lifetime. You know, not everyone gets to see the sun rise and the sun set over the water every day. I'm a commercial fisherman. You know, some people do say, oh, she's a fisherwoman, and I'm like, no, I'm a commercial fisherman. Just like the guy standing next to me.
While I was in college, I worked as a waitress during the year, and then I knew a lot of fishermen. I decided I wanted to go fishing, and I ended up fishing for 5.5 years out of Point Judith and a little bit out of New Bedford, and it was awesome. I loved it. I remember when I was first looking for a job down the point, I had some guy sit me on a reel of rope and tell me to go home and get married. I had other people saying, we don't hire girls on this boat, you know, and I was persistent enough, and you know, maybe the boat that I did get on initially was not the best, but they did take me, and then things got better from there. I saw an ad in the paper for a job at Trawlworks, and I thought, well, I don't know a lot about mending. I'll come here and learn, and then I'll go back fishing again. And I came here in 1988, and I never left. So here I am almost 30 years later. It's actually kind of amusing. When I was in college, I took a class in net mending that was at the University of Rhode Island at the fisheries school, just for something different to do. And I ended up failing it, of all things. So there you go. It's kind of ironic. So we design, we build, and then when you tear it up, we'll repair it if you bring it back to us. Traditionally, nylon was the preferred material for the webbing that was in squid nets, and we used to carry a black twisted nylon, which we still do carry, but we don't use as often. Guys have moved to polyethylene, and now there are also these high tenacity polyethylene twines available on the market where you can use a really thin thread, but it's super strong, so it reduces the drag coefficient. If you have a lot of small mesh in your net and you're able to use like a 1.1 millimeter twine instead of a 2 mil or higher, then you can reduce your drag quite a bit, which means less fuel, less pressure on the engine, all kinds of things. You can move faster. You know, with squid, speed is really important. So when a guy comes in, we'll sit down with him and we'll ask him these questions. You know, are you rigged for dragging? What kind of horsepower do you have? What type of engine do you have in the boat? What's your gear reduction? Wheel size? What's your tow wire size? Because tow wire too, depending on the thickness or diameter of it, can add to the drag load of everything you're towing. And you know, how much ground cable do you pull? Those are the kind of questions we ask, and then they'll tell us what they're looking for exactly. And they're pretty specific. So generally we build to order, and you know, knock on wood, we've been able to stay busy enough.
I got into trap fishing because of my brother. He asked me last year if I wanted to do like a part-time job on the boat, and I kind of thought about it for a little while. Like, I think right away I was like, yeah, that sounds kind of cool, but like, let me think about it. And then I think like a week later I was like, yeah, I'll definitely do it. It sounds good. Sign me up. And I'm happy I did that. I do love it. It's a good time out there, but it's a little hard working with your brother all the time, but and just the job itself. But yeah, that's how I got into it, my brother. The learning curve was a lot for me because I didn't know anything about it. It was all brand new to me, but it's been fun and I'm happy to learn it, and I love using my hands. I love being out in the water. I love all the creatures I didn't know existed and all the birds in the air, and I don't know anything about tides or wind or any of that. And that's what's fun about it. You get to learn every day. I love being on the water, all the action coming out on the table. Everything's all crazy and haywire, and you gotta go through and sort out and pull and not touch this and touch here. So I love that aspect of it. You know, the osprey and different birds flying around, and you hear the horns of the boats, and when I finally like find a flow and feel like I have it that day, I'm not absolutely exhausted or something about me has clicked, and it's just kind of rhythmic. Learning how to do like the splicing, and learning about the tides and the moon and those little clouds over there mean this, and you know, the wind just picked up and you can feel it, and like all those little things. The physical part, being out there and that experience, I definitely enjoy. And the fish is fun. Clubbing bass might be a little fun. Clubbing bass might be a little fun. I might enjoy that. I love the community around trap fishing and being in the point in the Galilee. I've gotten exposed to a whole new culture because I feel like it's just this dying breed of men that don't exist anymore. It's definitely not ever boring. Every day you just gotta take it for what it is and just do your best you can. There's no routine, there's no like punch in, punch out. I feel like every day out there is great. When I first got my first paycheck last year, I was like, I got paid to do this? Get out. Like, I was like, no way. Like, this is a job that I get paid for? Being a woman, I don't ever think I've ever thought about that. As far as the work goes, I never let myself think I can't pick that up, or I can't pull that, or I can't grab that, I can't do that. I don't think that way. That's never been my mind frame. What is the job? What has to be done? How can I learn? How can I do it? But every day out there I love. I love every day out there. It's like, I treasure it. I really do. It's hard and it's tiring. But yeah, I want to continue to do it. I think it's a blast. And you learn so much every day. And it's fun. There's a social aspect to it. There's a physical aspect to it. There's definitely a mental aspect to it. It's extremely stimulating and all of that. But yeah, I like it. I want to keep doing it. When we started doing the oystering, the first year I wasn't very involved with. It was Ian sending in the application to the CRMC and going through the town and the Army Corps of Engineers and all of that process. So that process took a year. And at the end of that, when the lease was looking like it was coming through and he was going to get it, is when he pulled me into it, knowing that he would need a hand, especially with the paperwork and the bookkeeping, definitely the labor, and being involved and having somebody out there that he can count on consistently.
Lift that corner up, Stesh.
I've just had to learn as I go. I mean, my knowledge of fishing, of aquaculture, of any of that was minimum, bare minimum, having prior to being a deckhand part-time on the trap boat. So it's not like I came from some background. Like, I mean, I've been around the water my whole life. I've, lived on the beaches. I live in South County. That's like one of the best parts about living here is surfed my whole life, and I've worked in restaurants my whole life. So seafood, everything. But I'd never really understood where all that came from and what that really meant, I think, until I started working in Point Judith, and then that learning curve began of like, oh my God, scallops are that price for a reason, So yeah, that is quite a learning curve. Everything about being on the farm has been a learning curve for both Ian and myself in terms of building the gear and the bags and the bag size and the quantities that you can put into the bags and having to deal with the tides, learning how to drive a boat. Yeah, and then obviously the bookkeeping side, very difficult. But I have enjoyed it, and I think it's actually made me better, stronger, more knowledgeable. I feel like Ian and I have gotten to a place where it's like, okay, we have a little bit of a rhythm. We've done this before. It's a couple years in. We know what to think about. We know what to plan for. We know when we're selling the most. We know when we're selling the least. What other ways can we get our product out? And I think that part of it too has been interesting because it's farming. Everything about oyster farming is farming. You're dealing with the elements which you have no control over. You're seeding things. You're tending to things as they grow, just as you would a farm. And it's like a baby. You have to be out there all the time, taking care of it. You can't leave it alone. And I've realized, I think, with oysters is the availability of where you can sell something is harder. Yeah, like I have oysters. Oh man, you have oysters? I love some oysters. Cool, here you go. But it's not that simple. You can't just hand them out to people. It doesn't work like that. That is not something I anticipated. Like I just thought, we're getting into aquaculture and we're going to be farming and growing oysters. There'll obviously be somewhere to sell them. Like I'd never questioned that there wouldn't be a time to sell them or that it would be difficult to find a way to sell them. That definitely was something I didn't anticipate. I'm like, what? We have all these beautiful oysters and nowhere for them to go? Like, no, they're ready. They want to go. They need to be sold, you know? But just because you have the product and they're perfect and the way you want them and they're great, now you have to figure out how to get them there. I think that's a little more challenging with seafood, with aquaculture, with oysters, than it might be with, you know, other types of traditional farming. So the sales part of it is a little challenging, just the avenues for it. Working on the trap boat has helped me fall in love with seafood. Filleting fish right on the boat and bringing it home and cooking it on the grill, that's a very satisfying thing. And I mean, that's what oyster farming is too. We're growing food and we're growing it for the community that's around us, not some foreign anywhere. It's for people that we see and are around and interact with. So it's very cool.